Picture a path through a forest. It is 40,000 years ago. You are walking that path, and you are not alone. Your group is nearby, somewhere behind you, moving through the trees. And then, without warning, you see something that stops everything. A face you do not recognize. In that fraction of a second, before a single conscious thought has formed, something inside you fires. Your heart accelerates. Your muscles tighten. Your eyes lock onto the stranger and refuse to look away. You do not decide to feel this. You do not choose it. It happens to you faster than language, faster than memory, faster than anything you would call a decision. And here is what makes this strange. That same reaction is happening to you right now. Every time you walk past someone you have never seen before. Every time a new face appears in your peripheral vision in a crowded place. Every time someone sits down next to you on a bus or stands too close in an elevator. The ancient alarm system fires, quieter now, muffled by 10,000 years of civilization. But it fires. It was never turned off. It was only turned down. This is the story of why your brain still treats strangers as threats, and why that instinct which once kept your ancestors alive is now one of the most consequential forces shaping human society. In the Pleistocene, the world your ancestors inhabited was not a world of cities or nations or neutral public spaces. It was a world of groups, small, tight, interdependent bands of roughly 20 to 50 people who knew each other completely. Every face, every voice, every smell. These groups were the entire known social universe. And outside that universe, there was only one category: unknown. Unknown was not a neutral classification. Unknown was dangerous by definition. Anthropologist Robin Dunbar, whose research on social cognition and group size has become foundational to how we understand human evolution, has shown that the human brain evolved specifically to manage a social world of around 150 people. That is Dunbar's number. The cognitive ceiling of meaningful social relationships the human mind can track simultaneously. Beyond that number, the system begins to fail. Faces become unfamiliar. Intentions become unreadable. Trust becomes impossible to calculate. And in the ancestral environment, an unreadable face was not an inconvenience. It was a mortal risk. Archaeological evidence makes this clear in ways that are difficult to look at directly. Studies of skeletal remains from prehistoric populations show extraordinarily high rates of violent trauma, healed fractures, embedded projectile points, skull injuries consistent with blunt force impact. Research led by Lawrence Keeley, published in his landmark analysis of prehistoric warfare, documented that violence between human groups was not occasional or exceptional. It was endemic. It was built into the structure of how humans related to anyone outside their immediate community. The stranger on the path was not just unfamiliar. The stranger on the path was statistically likely to be dangerous. Your amygdala, the ancient threat detection structure deep in your brain operating far below conscious awareness, learned this lesson across hundreds of thousands of years of selection pressure. It learned to fire before the prefrontal cortex could weigh in. It learned to categorize faces faster than any other stimulus the brain processes, and to sort those faces into two categories with ruthless speed: known or unknown, safe or threat, us or them. Neuroscientist Lasana Harris at University College London has spent years studying what happens in the brain when people encounter faces they perceive as outside their social group. What he found was that the medial prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for social cognition, for modeling other people as full human beings with thoughts and feelings, actually deactivates in response to certain outgroup faces. The brain, in a very real neurological sense, stops processing strangers as fully human. It treats them as objects, as threats, as things to be assessed for danger rather than people to be understood. This is not a character flaw. It is not a moral failure. It is the output of a system that was designed to keep a small group of people alive in a world where every stranger represented a genuine existential risk. But understanding the system is only the beginning. Because the system did not work the same way for every stranger, and the exceptions are just as important as the rule. There was one circumstance in which ancient humans consistently chose not to attack a stranger on sight. One situation that overrode the threat response and opened the possibility of something else entirely. Trade. Archaeological evidence from sites across Africa, Europe, and Asia shows that by at least 100,000 years ago, and possibly much earlier, human groups were exchanging resources across distances that could not be explained by accident. Shells found hundreds of kilometers from the coastlines where they originated. Obsidian from volcanic sources appearing in settlements far outside any possible foraging range. Pigments and tools moving along routes that required repeated, deliberate contact between groups that were not family. Someone had to meet someone they had never seen before, and instead of attacking, they exchanged something. This moment, whenever it happened, wherever it first occurred, was one of the most consequential in human history. It required something that did not come naturally. It required suppressing the amygdala's alarm, overriding hundreds of thousands of years of threat programming, standing in front of an unknown face and choosing, deliberately, to extend something instead of withhold everything. Anthropologist Marshall Solins described this early exchange behavior as a form of what he called generalized reciprocity, giving without an immediate expectation of return as a signal of peaceful intent. The gift was not just an object, the gift was a message. It said, "I am not a threat." And in saying that, it created a temporary suspension of the stranger as enemy framework that the brain defaulted to automatically. Ritual played a central role in making this possible. Early human groups developed elaborate protocols for first contact, specific gestures, specific positions, specific ways of approaching that signaled non-aggression before a single word was exchanged. Archaeologist Christopher Boehm, in his research on the emergence of social norms and hierarchy in hunter-gatherer societies, has documented how these protocols functioned as a kind of pre-linguistic language of safety. They allowed two strangers to communicate trust before trust had been earned through experience. These rituals were not decoration. They were technology. Social technology built to solve one of the most dangerous problems in the human world. How do you approach someone whose intentions you cannot read without getting killed in the process? The answer your ancestors developed was, you make your intentions readable first. You use your body to broadcast safety before your words can establish it. You approach slowly. You show your hands. You make yourself smaller. You offer something. And here is where this ancient history collides with your present. Every social norm you follow without thinking, the handshake, the wave, the eye contact held just long enough but not too long, the careful management of personal space in public places, the instinct to smile at a stranger who holds a door open, every one of these behaviors is a descendant of those early protocols. You are still broadcasting safety signals to strangers whose amygdalae are still running the same threat detection software your ancestors ran on the savannah. The system never stopped. It evolved a layer of civilization over the top of it. But underneath that layer, the calculation is still happening. Psychologist Henri Tajfel, whose work on social identity theory transformed how we understand group psychology, demonstrated in a series of now famous experiments that the US versus them distinction requires almost nothing to activate. Tajfel divided research participants into groups based on completely arbitrary criteria. Preference for one painter over another, a coin flip, the most trivial possible distinction, and found that group members immediately began favoring their own group and discriminating against the other. The content of the distinction was irrelevant. The existence of a boundary was enough. The amygdala does not need a good reason to fire. It needs a category, and the category of stranger is one of the oldest, deepest categories the human brain knows. But the story does not end with the threat response. Because the same species that attacked strangers on sight also built trade networks, formed alliances, created art that traveled across continents, and eventually developed every form of cooperation that makes modern civilization possible. The threat response was real, and the capacity to override it was equally real. What your ancestors discovered, slowly, painfully across thousands of generations, was that the stranger on the path was not just a threat. The stranger on the path was also a resource, a potential ally, a source of information about territory, weather, animals, water, someone who knew things you did not know, someone whose group had things your group needed, someone whose children might one day become part of your world. The most successful human groups were not necessarily the most aggressive toward strangers. They were the ones who learned to make the calculation faster and more accurately, to assess threat without defaulting to attack, to extend trust without abandoning vigilance, to hold both possibilities open long enough to find out which one was true. You are descended from people who got that calculation right enough times to survive. Picture a path through a forest. It is this morning. You are walking down a street, and someone you have never seen before is walking toward you. For a fraction of a second, before a single conscious thought is formed, something inside you fires. Your eyes assess. Your body tightens slightly. The ancient system runs its ancient check, and then you nod, or you look away, or you hold a door open. The stranger passes. The alarm quiets, and you carry the oldest software ever written inside a human brain. Still running, still calculating, still deciding. In every moment, in every crowded place. Whether the face in front of you is safe,